I have an issue with writing novels, so bear with me. I hadn't realized I buried this memory until a weird trigger made me remember it a few months ago, and I honestly say it was the scariest thing in my life, and I think it shaped how I see the world a lot more than I realized. I'll start with what triggered the memory. I was watching the first season of The Sinner a few months ago when the main character starts psychotically stabbing a guy. I got very perturbed in my stomach. The scene is extremely disturbing and sometimes scenes just get to me, but I'm a rabid horror fan and typically am unfazed by these things. I've never experienced such a visceral, lasting reaction to a scene on television, and it kind of freaked me out. I watched a few episodes at my friend's and felt panicky and trapped, and eventually I went home because I couldn't bear the feeling I had watching it. Then, as my obsessive only child Enneagram Type 5 self always does, I began obsessing over finding the root of the cause of the skin-crawling feeling I couldn't shake. I finally remembered it. I don't remember the exact moment, but later on in the show, something triggered the memory of what happened to my mom and I when I was a kid. This happened in 2004 when I was 11. My mom is a paralegal and at the time worked at a family law firm. Something urgent came up, as is life in the legal world, and she had to go get case materials from her job that night, so she took me with her to go grab them. It was around 7 p.m. I should mention, I guess I lived in a fairly affluent, nice neighborhood where it was very safe and nothing bad really happened. My mom and I watch horror movies, so this isn't a forgot to lock the front door story, because hell no. I say this to give credit to my mom's insane sense of intuition that likely saved our life that night. We pull into the parking lot, and my mom doesn't get out of the car. I'm an only child, so I was reading in the back seat and honestly didn't notice nor care, but eventually I asked her why we weren't getting out of the car. She replied that she was waiting because as we pulled in, someone walked through the parking lot and got into their car right behind us, then proceeded to wait in his car while it was on with the lights pointed at our car. It wasn't overtly sketchy or creepy, as there were several non-ominous explanations, but my mom had a gut feeling, and I'm glad she trusted her intuition and proceeded very deliberately and carefully because it quite possibly saved our life. After 5 to 10 minutes, she eventually turned to me and was like, "Okay, I have no idea what this guy's doing, so let's grab the stuff and leave." I didn't know at this time because I was at this point mildly oblivious, but he got out of his car and followed us. My mom told me to hurry up because it was freezing, and we jogged to the door. Her building required a card to buzz you inside, so once we got in, we figured we'd be fine. The parking lot we were in is giant, and random people hang out there all the time, including myself frequently as a teenager, drinking Four Locos in the parking lot. Classic. And he came from seemingly nowhere, so the chances of him also having a car to buzz in were not very high. This was also something I wasn't really aware of or paying attention to at the time, but a few moments after we buzzed in, thinking we were in the clear, he came in right behind us. I asked my mom about this. I didn't learn what happened until later. I can understand why she didn't tell me. And she said a few things ran through her mind. He could have been a total psycho who stole someone's card, which was the least likely as it was just too fucking random. So he was either an employee or a client. They held late-night mediation sessions inside the building, so it was typical to give clients a temporary pass for convenience. I'm going to assume this practice changed after this event. My mom, knowing the ID card system, actually wondered if she was overthinking it at this point. But it was just that gut feeling and stuck to it, and truly taught me from the get-go to fuck politeness. I hadn't seen him follow us in, and my mom honestly played it so cool that I didn't even put two and two together, and just thought it was another random employee. But I remember just having a weird gut feeling that I couldn't just put my finger on, and mercifully I just shut up and followed my mom's lead. Before he came in, my mom was frantically pressing the elevator button just in case he somehow got in, but he hadn't come in yet. He came in and waited for the elevator with us. My mom was fake polite and said hi, then when the elevator came, he got in and held the door open for us, waiting. My mom really fucking killed it, thinking on her feet, and pretended to get a call and kind of shooed me to the side and told him, "Oh, I have to take this, we'll just wait for the next one, thank you," and ushered us away. I followed without protest, even though I saw that no one had called her. After getting the weird feeling and seeing her fake a call, I knew something was up. That, and he was extremely creepy, just standing there, holding open the elevator, staring at us. his elevator took off, she immediately pressed a button so the next one would come down and grab me and said quietly, "That was the man who was waiting behind us in the car in the parking lot. He got out of his car and followed us inside. I was not letting us get in the elevator with him. When the elevator comes, we're going to run to my office and wait a few minutes, then take the stairwell out." At this point, I'm freaking the fuck out, but stayed calm and quiet and followed her lead. She saw that his elevator went to the 3rd floor. She was on the 2nd floor, so we wouldn't run into him. Even if he somehow discovered we were on the 2nd floor on a different elevator, her office was right next to it, and he wouldn't have ever caught up to us. We ran into her office and locked the door and waited about 5 to 10 minutes while she held an ear to the door to make sure she didn't hear anything. As I'm writing this, I'm almost laughing like a lunatic because at this point we sound like paranoid freaks as really nothing had happened, but I'm so glad we watched too many horror movies. We then unlocked the door and quickly looked out, then ran to the stairwell and ran the fuck out of her office, got in the car, and drove home. That was the end of the story for me at the time. I asked my mom when I was a teenager if she remembered that weird time at her office when we hid in her office and ran away from a guy in the elevator and her face turned white. And she told me what transpired while we were waiting in her office and ran out the soundproof stairwell. The man in the elevator was there for a custody mediation session with his estranged ex-wife. He was against the divorce and was desperately trying to stop his wife from divorcing him. The custody session took place before my mom and I got there. He had refused to sign papers that would have awarded him less than 50% of their children living with them. He apparently got so angry that he got up and walked out halfway through the session. His wife decided to remain in the office for about 25 minutes after he left because she was freaked out. During this time, he went back to his car and sat inside it and sobbed. This is when my mom and I had pulled into the office building. He eventually grabbed a pair of kitchen scissors he had in the glove box and got out and went back to the building, which is when he followed my mom and I inside. I'm not sure if us getting out of the car kind of snapped him out of it and gave him the push, if you will, to go back inside. He came back inside at the same time as us and got in the elevator, which he invited us inside with him. Based on the evidence from the trial involving a gray sweatshirt, I'll put the links below, prosecutors put together that he went to the 3rd floor and looked around, waiting for his wife. He got back in the elevator and waited until his wife went to leave and get in the elevator. He proceeded to ambush her and stabbed her 106 times with a pair of scissors in his pocket. He murdered his wife in the most gruesome fashion. The details of the case are horrifying. The links are below, but fair warning on the graphic details. What chills me to my core is wondering what would have happened if we got in the elevator. It was clear he had an agenda and a direct target. It's highly possible he would have left us alone and went along with his plan. But the last detail is that while he was waiting in his car, he was snorting methamphetamines and was high as a fucking kite. The mediator was the key witness in trial, and her testimony is horrifying. Her husband also worked in the building, and she was walking to his office when she heard screaming. When she got closer to the elevator, she heard the wife yelling her name. She yelled out, "It's him." She found the husband dragging his wife inside the elevator with blood everywhere, all over the walls. Then, in front of the mediator, he continued to plunge the scissors into his wife. When the police got there, they found him holding his wife, who was dead, choking her with his arm around her neck. This all took place while we were still in the building. We didn't hear it because we were in the cement stairwell and ran directly outside. All of the above is to say he clearly went absolutely psychotic and lost his absolute mind. Someone who stabs their wife over 100 times with a pair of goddamn poultry scissors is clearly fucking insane, but him rapidly continuing to murder her in front of the mediator and choking a dead body when the police arrived is a horrifying level of insane. That, and he was high on methamphetamines. There's nothing to say that we wouldn't have set him off in the most random way, or that he had already entered his psychotic break, or that he wouldn't have wanted to get us out of the way. My mom's actions likely saved our lives that night. She had a gut feeling and trusted her intuition. I read stories on here every day and sympathize heavily with them. Of people, particularly women, who are conditioned to be polite and end up in danger as a result. My mom knew the fake call might have seemed like bullshit, but she did not give a fuck and was absolutely not getting in the elevator with him. She's not only my hero, but my best teacher. I learned that night to be hyper vigilant, pay attention to every little detail of my surroundings, and to fuck politeness and never dismiss my gut. I will never forget the slightly too wide, toothy smile that didn't seem to reach his eyes while he stood 5 feet away from my mom and I holding open the elevator. Now that I've had this memory resurface, I think about it all the time of what had happened if he had gotten in the elevator. Links to the trial and murder details below. Rest in peace to the woman who was murdered. I think about her and her family often. We met the guy, but thankfully we'll never meet again. Enjoy life in prison. Any theories? Leave them in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe. Thank you, and good night.